Hey guys, it's Nick Hodges here, and today I'm going to talk about a historical event that truly shocked me when I learnt about it. You've all asked me if I could do podcasts talking about little snippets of history that may never make it into my video reviews. They've all been fantastic suggestions, and it makes sense for me to put them into podcasts. As you can imagine, every single day I am literally just poring over documentaries, online articles, and books for my research, and about 95% of them will never make it into my reviews. Just because there's so many things that have, of course, happened to us, even though all of them are equally fascinating. So I try to store them in my head for maybe one opportunity in the future where something will pop up in a film that would justify me using what I have learned. However, during my research yesterday, I came across a story that I couldn't just put away for a rainy day. The story doesn't get as much attention as it should, and I am fairly certain that no high school criteria covers this because its subject matter concerns an especially dark chapter in American history. Now, the purpose of this podcast is not to point fingers, and it's certainly not meant to be taken as anti-American. We, of course, cannot turn back the clock, and it's not right to judge an entire people based on the crimes their ancestors have committed, however recent they may be. Now, the reason I say this is because this is a podcast concerning Native American history, a topic many Americans are either uncomfortable with or confrontational about. All I can say to that is, good. You should be uncomfortable, the same way Belgians should be uncomfortable when the Congo is brought up, or the British should be uncomfortable when India, the Maori, and the Aborigines are brought up. As I always say, the only way to really self-improve is to self-criticize first. And even though we cannot bring back the dead, the legacy of this tragic event can still be fixed today. So let's get to it. In 1889, a way of life that existed for thousands of years for Native Americans had finally come to an end. The great people of the plains were forced off their land and were now constricted on remote reservations. They now had to change their entire culture and become farmers. But the land they were expected to farm was infertile and incapable of producing enough food to feed themselves. This was, of course, land that the United States didn't really want anyway. They picked the best for themselves, and these were simply just like scraps left over. So, of course, famine was widespread throughout the reservations, and the Native Americans had to rely on corrupt government officials to bring in food and supplies just to stay alive. But of course, there was never enough, and they began to starve as a result. So, combine this with disease, and the picture gets worse. A comparison I can make is anytime you turn on the television and you see those charity commercials with crying, disease-ridden African babies with swollen bellies, and that's a modern day equivalent to what was going on these reservations. Now, I'm sure you guys can imagine that these Native Americans probably missed the good old days, where they rode across the prairies and hunted buffalo and knew absolute freedom. So, would you hold it against them if they reminisced on those days and wished to return to a time before the white men ever came? Because the United States government at the time certainly did. In desperation, the Native Americans had started performing the ghost dance, a heartbreaking cry out to their ancestors to resurrect the lives of all those they had lost and loved within that year, and to restore them all to the past they had once known. In Porcupine Creek, thousands of Lakota people undertook this dance. So all day and all night they danced and chanted without rest. It was come to a point where individuals would drop dead like flies from exhaustion. So more and more Native Americans started joining them, and then the United States government viewed this dance as a challenge to their authority, perceiving it to provoke resentment and anger among the Indians, and that the uprising would soon follow. So they outlawed the dance, stating that it was an unlawful assembly and a direct threat to the people of the United States. The thing is, though, when your people are starving and suffering from an epidemic, you kind of have it in your head of what else have you got to lose. So I understand why many Native Americans ignored this. It was said that this dance would work if they all just joined in, that the nearly extinct buffalo would return and their ancestors would hear them if everyone simply just took part and showed their commitment. So just after Christmas in 1890, a band of nearly 400 Hakwoju Sioux, mostly women and children, left the Cheyenne River Agency in South Dakota and headed for a meeting at the Pine Ridge Agency in hopes that this ghost dance would be an answer to their prayers. They were then intercepted by the infamous 7th Cavalry at Porcupine Butte and ordered to make camp at Wounded Knee Creek. When the Native Americans woke up the next morning, they found that they were completely surrounded by over 500 American soldiers who had positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the encampment with rifles and rapid-fire cannons fixed on their position. The Native Americans were then all ordered to gather around a flag of truce, while several soldiers went down to the camp, confiscating any possible weapons they could find, whether it be guns to even cooking utensils. One soldier tried to take a rifle from a deaf man who allegedly wasn't letting go, saying that he had paid a lot of money for it. The gun then went off by accident, and immediately the entire 7th Cavalry opened fire on the Indians with their rifles and then their cannons. Some of the Indians who had not given up their rifles returned fire, but they were instantly killed. The 7th Cavalry fired indiscriminately and without pause into the camp. Women and children tried to flee the camp, but they were hunted down on horseback and were either shot or butchered with sabers. Some had been killed up to 2 miles away from the camp. When it was all over, 25 Americans had been killed, mostly by friendly fire, and at least 230 Sioux were dead. The soldiers then dug a massive grave and piled the bodies into it. It was the last act of the American Indian Wars, and is still officially known today as the Battle at Wounded Knee. It wasn't a battle, it was a fucking massacre. In a disgusting fashion, President Harrison's administration, at the time, blamed everything on the Native Americans, saying that they provoked the senseless slaughter and proclaimed the soldiers as heroes, handing out 20 medals of honor for what they did. I find this truly disturbing, as to what I recollect, the Medal of Honor should only be given out for acts of valor that goes above and beyond the call of duty. Valor, that means courage. There's nothing especially brave about murdering defenseless women and children. Colonel James Forsyth, who commanded the 7th Cavalry that day and ordered them to open fire, was later exonerated for his actions and promoted to Major General. These 20 medals of honor are still officially recognized and legitimized today. Native Americans of the Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation have asked Washington time and time again for those medals to be rescinded. Senator John McCain has acknowledged that what happened at Wounded Knee was wrong, but defends these medals, stating, and I quote, "The policies and decisions of the United States government that led to the Army's being at Wounded Knee in 1890 doubtless can be categorized as unjust, unwise, or worse. Nevertheless, a retrospective judgment that the government's policies and actions were dishonorable does not warrant rescinding the medals awarded to individual soldiers for bravery in a brief, fierce fight in which 25 soldiers were killed and 45 others were wounded. Neither today's standards for awarding these medals nor policies of the United States with regards to Indian tribes are what they were in 1890. So basically, what he's saying is that just because we believe that massacring innocent people is wrong today doesn't justify rescinding these medals because the mindset was different back then. Why? Where does he get that logic from? The people awarded these medals and responsible for this are long dead. I seriously doubt that their families would kick up a fuss. In fact, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't dare. It's not going to cost you anything to do this, and it would be a good first step towards improving relations with the Lakota people. One I think that Washington is long overdue on and certainly needs to improve. And finally, it's not a breakaway from tradition to do so, because it wouldn't be the first time America has rescinded medals of honor. Why John McCain is only half right in his statement of how the mindset was different back then was because in those days, medals of honor were handed out like fucking Skittles. Because Congress established no criteria in earning these medals in the first place. Between 1891 and 1897, presidents at that time awarded more than 500 medals. Compare that today with how many servicemen were awarded in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq combined, and the number adds up to 16. The reason why there are so few awarded is because today, absolute proof of the most distinguished gallantry in battle needs to be provided in order for you to deserve that medal. In fact, the excess number of medals awarded in the late 19th and the early 20th century cheapened the value of these medals so much that in 1917, 911 medals were rescinded because they did not justify their merit. So, I don't understand why they just don't rescind them already. The only ones causing a fuss is them. This horrific atrocity brings shame on a medal that's supposed to honor only the most courageous of American servicemen, not 20 racist dickheads who committed mass murder. So, I implore you to sign a petition today to rescind these medals. I've added the link below in the description box, and it's not going to take up that much of your time. And if you can, share this petition with others. There's not much that can be done to make up for the crimes committed against the Native American people, but you know what? At least this is a start. If you would like to know more about the subject, then I would highly recommend for you to watch the HBO movie Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. It's absolutely fantastic, and another example of why HBO is taking the lead in producing mature and excellent television programs. So I hope you found this story at least interesting, and I promise next time that I'm going to upload another podcast that's going to be slightly less depressing. There was something about this story that jumped out at me, and I think it's one that deserves recognition. In the meantime, thank you all so much for your support. Every single one of your comments really make my day in reading them. Each one makes me so excited to move on to the next review. So on that note, I would like to officially announce that the next review that will be uploaded on Saturday the 15th of August will be Kingdom of Heaven. If you've been waiting for me to tear apart a terribly historically inaccurate film, then I think you're going to like this review. In the meantime, this is Nick Hodges, and thank you very much for listening.